Welcome to Legal Lines. I'm your host, Len Smith. Legal Lines is brought to you by the York County Bar Foundation, serving as the charitable nonprofit wing of the York County Bar Association since 1991, with a primary purpose of promoting educational law programs such as Legal Lines and supporting various community initiatives and service programs that aim to improve the quality of life for all York Countyans by providing better access to justice for those in need. According to FBI statistics, hate crime incidences have been more frequent and more violent in recent years. The most common to those are directed race, ethnicity, and ancestry, which almost hit 60%, LGBTQ, approximately 21%, and religion at 17%. As reflected by the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office, when an act is a crime, it's an offense against the entire community, not just people directly involved. A hate crime magnifies the harm. The community hurt is not only the underlying offense, but also by the hateful messages the offenses send and the fear and intimidation it causes. Primary jurisdiction over most criminal matters in Pennsylvania, including hate crimes, lie with local law enforcement in that county's particular district attorney's office. However, it's worth noting that the Attorney General's Civil Rights Enforcement section has the authority to seek civil injunctions in appropriate cases, and federal law also provides powerful enforcement tools to both the FBI and the Department of Justice. Here today to help us better understand hate crimes is Clare Twomey, the Executive Director of the York City Human Relations Commission. Clare, thanks for joining us today.
I'm glad I can be here.
So tell us, what is the commission and what does it do?
So the Human Relations Commission is tasked with, based on Ordinance 185, with investigating any forms of discrimination against the protected classes in York City. And those discrimination can take place in public accommodations, education, housing, and employment. So that is our primary directive.
All right, so let's talk about protected classes.
Okay.
In Pennsylvania, who is protected and who is not?
So the protected classes in Pennsylvania are very different than the ones that are included in our 185. In Pennsylvania, we're talking about race, color, ethnicity, and religion. That's it. In the city of York, we have a much broader group of folks that fall into protected class.
Give us some examples.
So we have also race, religion, disability, gender identity, sexual orientation, cultural hairstyles, emotional support animals, or people who handle emotional support animals. This is just a smattering of folks who are covered when we are investigating any forms of discrimination.
Okay, so we're going to break this down a little bit here between criminal and civil. Now, civil being predominantly or exclusively what the commission does, correct?
Yes.
So in Pennsylvania, when we talk about hate crimes, there's not technically a hate crime statute. Right. It's actually called the ethnic intimidation law, right?
Correct.
And as you mentioned, that only covers race, color, religion, and national origin.
Correct.
Okay. Now, one of the things I want to talk about is language.
Sure.
You know, we all know that the Constitution, both the federal Constitution as well as our state Constitution, protects free speech.
Right.
So when does the use of language exceed my right to free speech?
Right. So when you're starting to take a look at speech versus hate speech, for example, what you're looking at is the intentionality of the speech that's being used. So oftentimes when somebody is using something just flippantly, but they're not necessarily intending a permanent or long-term harm, they're not using that speech over a long period of time, it's not followed up with any kind of violence or intimidation tactics, then you're kind of falling into that free speech. Even though it still may cause harm through microaggression, it doesn't necessarily meet the threshold that some of the laws or statutes say it needs to in order to be to be a hate speech. It crosses the line when the person who is speaking that way against another person is specifically identifying them as a person who falls into one of those protected classes. That speech is directed to intimidate, to harass, It's usually a barrage of terms. It's usually over a period of time. It can be followed up with any kind of intimidation or harassment tactics. Then you're kind of crossed over from just, hey, free speech to now you're intentionally going after that person because they are falling into a specific protected class.
Okay, so it could potentially, in those instances, fall underneath the statute we were referring to, the ethnic intimidation.
Correct.
But it's probably worth also mentioning that there's other statutes, such as terroristic threats
Correct.
or harassment,
Right.
that could potentially fall under as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have a situation here that doesn't arise to the level of a crime. It doesn't fit one of these statutes. Are there civil recourse to somebody intimidating me or attempting to intimidate me by one of these protected classes?
Absolutely. So if that happens in one of those places that I was talking about before, a public accommodation, employment, housing, education, then you can come to the Human Relations Commission because now.
Let me stop you there for
Okay.
just a sec.
Yeah.
Tell these people, what is a public accommodation? I know what that is,
Okay,
but
yep.
that's a weird word. What is it?
Absolutely. It is any particular institution. It's a restaurant, it's a library, it is a public place where everybody is supposed to be welcome. And so if there is someone who is singled out in that space because they fall into a protected class, and in our case, our protected classes are covered by Ordinance 185. This becomes a civil protection, and in those cases, we are protecting all of our marginalized communities that are identified in those protected classes. So it doesn't just meet the criteria for the 4 in the state statute. It now covers all of those classes in the city. So if it happens in those places within the city, they can come to us and they can file a complaint. We will follow through with doing an investigation, take it to hearing. If it needs adjudication, then it goes to our commission who determines outcome.
Okay, well, let's back up a little bit here.
Absolutely.
So by the title of your commission, and you mentioned it already, is York City, right?
Correct.
So York City Human Relations Commission. So I would make the assumption that you would only ever handle anything that happens within city limits. Is that correct?
It is in terms of following the process to fruition. So if it happens within the city limits, that is our jurisdiction. However, we do have a very close relationship with PHRC, the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. And while we will not investigate any particular cases that fall into that discriminatory category, we will meet with folks who are affected. We often get people who live in the city, but who have experienced discrimination in the county. They'll come in, they'll tell their story, and if we are able to sort of vet the story to see, you know what, there's probably an element of discrimination here, if not full blown, we will take a report and we refer that right to PHRC.
Okay. So it's based on where the act occurred.
Correct.
So I live in the city, but it happened in Springettsbury.
Right.
It's not under the jurisdiction or purview of the
Correct.
commission.
It is under the purview of Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission.
So talk to me a little bit about the difference between these two commissions, because it sounds like they kind of do the same thing.
They do. So Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission they follow the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. That's what sort of backs them and gives them the authority. They are appointed by the governor, and so they are kind of working within the government, but they're not the government, but they are appointed from that office. They basically pick up every other jurisdiction that doesn't have its own HRC. So I believe right now, don't quote me entirely, that there are 7 other independent human relations commissions or civil rights commissions throughout Pennsylvania. For example, there's one in Pittsburgh, there's one in, State College, Philadelphia, obviously York. And so we cover our own jurisdictions. PHRC picks up those areas. So for example, they would pick up York County. So that Springettsbury example that you gave, that would go to PHRC.
Okay. Now, obviously, both commissions are set up under different statutes.
Correct.
Is the content similar?
It's very similar. We have very similar protected classes. We try to be inclusive of those marginalized or underrepresented groups that are often victims of discriminatory behavior. So there's a lot of similarities.
Okay. So let's say we have a situation. It's occurred here in York City.
Hmm.
What should somebody do?
If
What's
some,
the first step?
Absolutely. If somebody is a victim of any type of discrimination, as we have defined, they can call my office, and immediately
And what's that phone number?
Oh my goodness,
Oh, I'm going to put you on the spot here.
it is 717-846-2926.
All right. Very good.
They can call the office, and we immediately set up at a time. We usually do a preliminary interview on the phone just to determine whether or not they're sort of meeting, or at least they're letting us know that yes, this does sound like discrimination. If it doesn't, we will walk them through what it sounds like, and if we have resources to make referrals, we do that. We're very careful about not hearing too much of the story on the phone, because a lot of times there is a certain amount of trauma that has occurred. And so we don't want to put people through a traumatic experience and then bring them in and put them through it again. So we get a little bit of their story, and we get them in as soon as possible so we can do a face-to-face interview. That's the first go-to. If there is enough there that seems that there is a complaint, we write up a complaint. We run it past our solicitor. We then file the complaint, giving it a case number. We deliver that complaint to the respondent to let them know that they need to respond to that. They cannot opt out. This is an ordinance. This is a city ordinance. They have to follow up.
Well, what if they don't?
If they don't, then it becomes a legal issue. So then we can now make a referral to our city council. We can then take it to, I always want to say small claims, and that's not what it is.
Magistrate
Common
district judge?
pleas.
Oh, common pleas. Okay.
Yep. And at that point, we also have subpoena power. Our ordinance gives our commission subpoena power.
Okay.
So we can start taking it up.
All right. So we have a complaint.
Mm-hmm.
The respondent has responded.
Correct.
What's the next step?
So one of the things we try to do right away is we try to provide a space where mediation or settlement can happen early. The sooner we can resolve this, the better it often is for all parties, as long as the settlement is fair and as long as it reduces, or at least it demonstrates to the person that we're looking to reduce the harm that they've experienced. So all along our process, we leave mediation open or settlement conversations open. If they respond, then we start our investigation. If they don't want to do mediation right away, we start our investigation, all witnesses, all paperwork, anything that could demonstrate that this definitely was discrimination. Or a lot of times, or I shouldn't say a lot, but sometimes it turns out that there is no cause. It was a misunderstanding, it doesn't meet the threshold, in which case then we dismiss it. Most of the time, we have been able to get people to the table. At somewhere in the process, we've been able to get them to the table. If not, we go through with the investigation, we share the evidence, we have a hearing. The hearing examiner, who's part of our commission, then takes all that information to our commissioners, and the commissioners adjudicate the outcome.
Okay, well, let's go back to the hearing.
Yes.
So the hearing is before the hearing examiner.
Correct.
So this is one person?
Yes.
So how does one become the trial examiner, the hearing examiner?
In our particular small situation, it is usually somebody that is on the commission, that has been trained. We usually, PHRC is great at providing training, great at providing, here are some resources that you can use so that we are doing our due diligence. That person then becomes or can be chosen or appointed by the chair of the commission to become the hearing examiner for that particular case.
So at the hearing, testimony, exhibits?
Yes, all of that.
So it's like any other trial that one might experience.
It is. Our bar is lower. So we are only focusing on evidence and witnesses that pertain to that particular complaint.
So things like hearsay and
Correct.
whatnot are allowed in.
They are allowed in.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So you can have witnesses who say, I heard this, or I've witnessed that, you can have that, and all of that information then goes to the commission. One of the things that's important though, before we even get to hearing, the respondent and oftentimes their attorney can say, you know what, we don't want to do your hearing. We want to take this right to common pleas. So that is always an option for that. They can't drop it, but they have to either go to the hearing or they can go to common pleas.
Okay.
If they go to common pleas, then usually we stay with the complainant and we try to find them an attorney. Now, we don't pay for that attorney, but we usually find someone who's willing to work on a commission based on the outcome, the settlement.
So we have a hearing in this
Mhm.
case. The examiner writes up a report and submits it to the commission,
Actually presents it to the commission.
presents it.
Yeah.
So how many people are on the commission?
Right now we have 7.
Is there room, are there more seats?
Yes, there are more seats. We can have up to 11.
Up to 11. And how does one get on this commission?
So on our commission, we usually representation is really important. So we usually attempt to find folks who fit into or represent at least somebody in a protected class. That's not always possible, but that's the goal. There needs to be a certain number from the county and the city. Usually we have a person on the commission who may be, I don't want to say in charge, but will start to advocate for, hey, if you know anybody, let us know. We do a pretty extensive interview. We want to make sure, and I'm not part of that is done by the commission or commissioners. We want to make sure that everybody who is chosen as a commissioner is fully on board with protecting every single person that falls into a protected class. You don't have the option of a commissioner to say, well, I will stick up for this group, but I don't really feel like sticking up for that group. That is not an option. You have to agree and you have to be okay with seeking out justice for every protected group.
Okay. So the city council appoints the commissioners?
Actually the mayor appoints, the people are chosen by the commission, they vote on it. That person is then sent to or presented to the mayor appoints, the council approves.
Okay. So we have our presentation
Mm-hmm.
to the commission,
Right.
council commission, and they make a decision. I would assume they would vote on this.
Correct.
And is it simple majority?
Yes.
4 out of 3 in this particular case?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a decision, and I'm not sure if I'm using the proper terminology, but there's a finding of discrimination or
Yes.
a non-finding.
Correct.
Okay. So regardless of the outcome, there's the ability to appeal this decision.
There is.
Okay. So I'm the complainant. You did not find in my favor. You
Correct.
found that there was no discrimination here. I can appeal it to the Court of Common Pleas.
We give a right to sue.
Okay.
And then they can go to the Court of Common Pleas.
Okay. So I can't go to the Court of Common Pleas until I get this
Correct.
right to sue, which would be the same as if I decide I don't want to have a trial or hearing in front of you.
Yes.
I can just go ahead and get that letter and immediately go up.
Right.
So we've talked about hate speech. Let's go back to hate crime.
Sure.
So what's the distinction between those two?
Well, a hate crime is defined by an act of violence. So hate speech can often lead to an act of violence, but it doesn't have to. Hate speech can exist in and of itself. When a person is attacking another person of a protected class because they are in that protected class, that's what defines it as a hate crime. So there's an element of bias that makes the person in a protected class a target, and it is usually followed by some sort of physical harm.
Now, we've talked a little bit about protective classes already.
Yes.
And Pennsylvania has its definition of what those classes are.
Correct.
And the commission has its own set, which
Yes.
is larger than that.
Yes, it is.
So where's the federal government fall in all this?
So the federal government is very closely aligned with our HRC, or maybe it's the other way around. But they have a much more expansive number of folks that fit into that protective class. PA only covers 4, Whereas the federal government, I'm not sure the exact number.
I'll read it off to you
All
here,
right, go
just
right
so, because
ahead.
that's what I didn't want to have you
No, go
remember
ahead.
everything. So it's, and this is one of the things I find interesting about it is it does talk about a victim's actual or perceived.
Correct.
So you don't have to be specifically one of these classes, but if you were perceived to be one of them, it's race, color, religion, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. So
Yes.
that is a rather broad group of protected classes.
It is, and I'm very proud to say that the Human Relations Commission even adds a few more to that.
And remind us what those are.
So it also takes a look at ethnic hairstyles and cultural hairstyles. We also take into consideration emotional support animals and people who handle emotional support animals. So it can be a trainer, for example.
Okay, and it's worth noting under the federal government, there's a number of other statutes that cover discrimination or intimidation for those. Although this isn't a complete list, it's worth mentioning again, damage to religious property, Church Arson Prevention Act, which deals with racial or religious damage to religious or racial characteristic type buildings, because they deem that to be a violation of the exercise of religion.
Right.
And then there's the criminal interference with the right to fair housing, which very similar to what the commission is doing regarding housing here in York County. There's
Right.
a federal side as well, where any discrimination based on housing, based on those protected classes, can be a violation.
That's right. And so we're a little into the weeds now, but if you start to take a look at what HUD has for their protected classes in terms of discrimination in housing, they closely resemble what we have. And we very much align ourselves with HUD when it comes to discrimination in housing, which actually then historically has given folks another recourse if they are experiencing discrimination in housing, they can go to HUD.
Okay, so there are a number of options out there, and that's what our guests should know.
Yes.
Is you've got options.
Yes.
And you don't have to do this by yourself either, right?
That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. We may not specifically cover hate crimes and hate speech because there's a criminality event, piece to that, which has to go through law enforcement. But if anyone's ever confused about where they fall, if they've ever been the victim or feel like they've been on the receiving end of any kind of discrimination, any kind of act that causes harm, they can always call us and we can walk them through it.
I'm going to ask you for that phone number again.
717-849-2926.
All right, great. Now, having said all this, if you or somebody you know is subjected to hate, first of all, if this is an emergency, call 911. If this isn't an emergency and you think you are a victim of hate, still call call the local police. And if you are in need of additional assistance, give Clare a call.
Absolutely.
At the commission.
Yep.
And also, the York County Bar Association has lawyers that are knowledgeable and trained in these areas. And you can call for referrals as well as other services that apply. So Clare, thank you so much for joining us today. This was incredibly informative and educational.
Thanks, Glenn.
Absolutely. So this has been Legal Lines. I'm your host, Glenn Smith. Legal Lines is brought to you by the York County Bar Foundation. And thanks for watching.